let's have a look at the first part of this conversation where there's not really a response to this, but I think it's fair for us to set up what the Bush says the fast tracking legislation is all about. So let's have a look at that. And then we're going to go into a response from Kieran. And honestly, I think the response that Kieran gives, like I was listening to this on my headphones as I was throwing the ball for the dog up at the park. And I was like, whoa, that is like mic drop moment. It was a really, really good explanation by Kieran we'll get to shortly. So here is the first part of the audio and video. And this is Daniel Faitaua talking to the Bush about what the fast track bill is all about.
Alienate some of people's concerns. Now, last night's One News Varian poll revealed the country is split on the bill. Chris Bishop is with us this morning alongside Labour MP Kieran McAnulty for our captain's panel. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good, thanks. Chris, I'll start with you. So the fast track bill, you'll be aware of this. Let me just tell you what people think and what some groups say. It's anti-democratic, it's anti-nature, dictatorship, and they'll have grand repercussions for iwi. I mean, that's just some of the words that's been described about the fast track bill. You say you're open to constructive changes. Am I right to say after watching last night's news that you're also open to reconsidering the power?
It is interesting, and we'll get to this afterwards, but Clint, but it is interesting that we're hearing yesterday that there's a bit of a back down on school lunches, and we're hearing today that there's a bit. Now, the optimist would say it's great for a government to hear, new ideas, to take new ideas on board and act with them. The pessimist would say, what else are they trying to do here? Like, what are they trying to do? This feels a bit dodgy. So, yeah, I'm not sure which one of those two it is yet, but we'll keep going.
Powers you and your other ministers have?
Yeah, we're open to changes. I mean, some of those comments are slightly over the top, but also the flip side is people get pretty frustrated at just how hard it is to build things in this country. 2 years to build a wind farm, 8 years to get permission, the length of time it takes to get housing consents, for example. So there is a flip side to all of that. What we're trying to do is just chart a reasonable course through the middle where we cut down on the red tape, we speed things up when it comes to getting permission to build things. We make it a one-stop shop. That's the core of the bill. But as far as some of the details in it, including some of the issues you've looked at, of course, we're very open to sensible feedback. It's before the committee right now, and we'll have a good look at it and go forward from there. But there's going to be a fast-track, one-stop shop bill. There's a debate around the detail.
Right. So that's the first part of the conversation. Now I remove the video, and then Clint, we can speak to it. Now the next part is going to be Kieran responding to that. But yeah, I mean, you're with us. You're a guest with us. You've been someone on the 9th floor as an advisor and been around those areas. What are your thoughts around the fast track bill? You got anything you want to say about it?
I guess there's two things from what Bishop said there. He talks about it takes 8 years to get a consent for a wind farm, 2 years to build it, and building consents take too long. There's actually a lot of wind farms consented not being built right now, and what's happening with home consents right now is the number of consents is in free fall, not because there's lack of capacity, but because of high interest rates killing off development. So it's everyone agrees that like resource consenting could be sped up, but there's actually other issues that are more problematic in those two areas that he's addressing. And right. So to get onto the content of this fast track, so a fast track system was created as part of the COVID recovery, right? And it's quite similar to, in fact, it's currently the law because it was carried over into the RMA reforms that Labour put through last year, which National then repealed, but they kept that fast track. And how that worked was there's an expert panel. The expert panel makes the recommendations, and it's the expert panel who actually decides whether the things get the consent or not. What Nationals turned it around, so it's going to be ministers who decide whether things get consent, and the expert panel cannot turn down a project, and that's what's got people worried because it's not the environment minister isn't even one of the ministers going to make the decision. So now, because of the backlash, you can see it there. He's starting to go, oh, actually, maybe we've got this wrong, and our polling isn't so flash, and maybe we can't afford this fight, and wouldn't it be bloody stupid if after all this huffing and puffing they end up with exactly what was the law before all of this? And they keep the fast track process that Labour created.
Without kind of like ruining the ending, that's sort of what Kieran's about to get to start with. But can I ask you, And like, I'm defaulting to you because you've been there and seen that on some instances. Is this government, in your opinion, sort of listening to people and going, oh, we can make better legislation? Or are they just fearful of the polls and they're a bit like, crap, what have we done? Need to cut back? Or is it something else?
I think there's the strongness in coming through is that these guys are reacting to political problems and negative polling. And you mentioned the school lunches before. That's another one where they're backing down because it's costing them politically. When people have just tried to convince them that this is a good thing and it's a good argument, it's the right thing to do, that hasn't swayed them.
Speaking of tangent slightly, we talked about the TVNZ poll here on I think approximately Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. No, Monday. And we were also very like, yeah, okay, Mikey, the hyperbole that can go elsewhere. They're not seats in the House today. But what was interesting about it is I think the commentary added on the sort of vibe of how this government is being seen today versus every other MMP government there has literally been at this point. I thought that's an interesting thing to think about. When you're talking about they're doing this because of the polls and because of bad press or whatever, what do you see in the TVNZ poll, if anything?
I mean, it's remarkably bad for a new government to be falling this low in the polls this quickly. Usually there's, they call it the honeymoon, but there's actually, usually quite a wave of popular support because this new government gets in and it's doing all these things people have been wanting for ages and they're listening, unlike the last lot. That's what usually happens. But these guys have come in and, from the smoking stuff through the clean car stuff, through the school lunches, that they've really shown arrogance and no willingness to listen. And I think that's showing in the polls. A lot of people having bias remorse on them. Luxon's incredibly low, but you look at the left and Labour, at 30%, it still isn't where it needs to be credible as a government, and 16% is too low for an opposition leader to be credibly to come through to be next Prime Minister. So Labour's got work to do too.
I wonder if there's any part of this as well. They're talking about the honeymoon period. I mean, maybe this is what a honeymoon looks like if you have to go on it with fucking David Seymour and Winston Peters. Maybe it would be as bad as this. I mean, could you think of much worse of going on a honeymoon with those two people? I mean, honestly. So maybe this is as good as it gets on that honeymoon. All right, let's keep trucking. The next part of this conversation. Oh, sorry, yeah.
Oh, sorry, just one quick thing on that. I do think that, Jacinda managed to work with Winston for a whole term, and it comes down to the relationship and how you establish it. And right from day one, Luxon told Winston, "You're in charge. I'll go following you around the country for these negotiations." Whereas Jacinda established a relationship where she was respected as Prime Minister, and Winston had his things and he pulled some sneaky stuff, but they worked at it. And
I saw a meme going around and it was a picture of King Charles, Prince William, and Prince Louis, and King Charles had the word Winston over him. Prince William had Seymour, and Louis, the little fella, had Luxon over him. I think that's kind of a bit of what you're saying as well. Okay, so let's get to this next piece of audio and video. This is basically Kieran McAnulty responding to the idea of this whole, fast tracking. And honestly, as I said, I was listening to it in my headphones, and this is what I did afterwards. I went, damn! Which I think is sort of the appropriate thing. Oh, stop, cancel, stop. After this conversation. So let's have a look what he had to say about the fast tracking. And just referencing back again to what Clint just said about, is this just going to be what Labour was saying was going to come in? It's kind of exactly what Kieran says. Have a listen.
He'll be competent and capable, but the point is that it shouldn't be ministers that are signing off these projects. That's an element to this proposal that is unique. There have been fast-track bills before, but it's the ministerial sign-off that is getting people worried. We have consistently ranked as one of the least corrupt countries in the world because we have these protections in place.
Yep.
Now, I've got no issues with Chris Bishop. I don't think he's corrupt, but it's the perception that can undermine the valued institutions and structures that we have in this country. We should not be bypassing community voice, and we should not be bypassing proper process. And it's those things that people have been worried about. They're also worried, I think, given what I've been hearing anyway, is that we had a replacement for the RMA. This government scrapped it, gone back to what it was, and then they've said, what it was isn't working, so this is why we need the fast track bill, and people don't buy that.
This is a really important, I'm actually going to go back, and I know you're all smart enough to get it, but maybe a national voter will come on this thing one day and need it explained. National got in, they repealed the changes to the RMA, which were going to fix some of the problems we're talking about. So it went back to the old RMA. Then National went, the old RMA doesn't work, so let's do fast tracking. We've said this to you a million times, people. The right get in, they say government doesn't work, or they say government doesn't work, then they get in, then they break government, and then they step back and they go, see, doesn't work. Told you it never worked. The other thing that's really important to know, and I'm not sure if this will play or not, but we'll give it a go, is talking about what is the perception here. There are some people who have always had a very, 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 very interesting perspective on, perception, like the perception of bias. I'll play a piece of audio, see if it comes through. Nope, it's not coming through. Okay, we'll leave that right there. It was a quote of Mr. Luxon when he was talking about it doesn't matter if the PIJF is actually bias or not, because the perception is as bad as if it was. And what Kieran's saying now is really true. This has a perception to it. I'm sorry, I know you can't chat, Clint, because it's messing up your audio. So let me get to the end of this and then we'll give you a crack.
And structures that we have in this country, we should not be bypassing community voice, and we should not be bypassing proper process. And it's those things that people have been worried about. They're also worried, I think, given what I've been hearing anyway, is that we had a replacement for the RMA.
Yep.
This government scrapped it.
Yep.
Gone back to what it was, and then they've said what it was isn't working, so this is why we need the fast track bill, and people don't buy that. We know we need to do things quicker, and we know we need a streamlined process, because let's be honest, the RMA that they've brought us back to is cumbersome and takes time and is frustrating. But the answer to it is not giving 3 ministers sign off on projects and bypassing community support.
There you go. So there is the conversation for you, Clint. Or let me just remove it properly so you don't echo. There we go. Yeah, I think that was a really strong, you can't really argue. Daniel Faitau afterwards just kind of goes, Chris Bishop, a response? He didn't really say it like that, but that was the vibe of it, because it was so, eloquent and nailed it all down. What are your thoughts?
Bishop was nodding along at a couple of points there and had to stop himself. Yeah, I think Kieran really has a skill at putting things plainly and clearly, and yeah, he does that well in his laconic manner, and he's right. These guys, and it's not just the RMA, that they came in and repealed all kinds of things and said, it's crap, we're going to fix it, and now everyone is standing around saying, well, what's your solution, mate? It's in the infrastructure space as well. All these infrastructure projects are on hold because they came and said, nah, it's all wrong, we're going to fix it. And and now everyone's standing around going, well, where's your solutions?
The fast track laws that get brought in as well are normally brought in like if there's a Christchurch earthquake, or if there's a cyclone, or if there's COVID, something that actually goes, we can't ass around with this, guys. This has to go straight through. But National's using it basically if they want to legislate the new letterhead on the, the government's paper at the moment. It's just like they're using it for not what fast track was designed for. And it's interesting because Kieran was saying people aren't buying it. People aren't, and they're not accepting it. And that comes back to that question. If National or NACT NZ are pulling back a little bit on this, is it because they can see people aren't buying it and they don't want to be kind of thrown out of office, metaphorically speaking, with bad opinion polls?
Yeah. And I think Kieran made a really good point that you don't have to believe that Chris Bishop is corrupt to think that a law that enables corruption is bad. That it's a Robert's Charter. You're fine as long as there's no bad ministers making the decision, and that's not how good government works. It should be corruption proof. not hoping that no one corrupt comes in there. I also think one of the big things in how National wants to do it is not allow appeals on the decisions that the ministers make, and that's going to open a whole lot of cans of worms because courts hate what they call ouster clauses, where the executive or the parliament tries to say, no, you can't check on our decisions, and that's why judicial review was invented, so that courts can say, no, we're going to check with you if you're within your powers, whether you like it or not. So the Nats are kind of setting themselves up for a situation where unpopular projects they're going to be personally signing off on these projects that might have not be very popular at all in locales, generate a lot of local opposition, and still end up in court and still being challenged in court. And I think the politics of that is, I think they're starting to realize they got the politics of that all wrong.
And like I said, I mean, this, Clint, what we're trying to do here is, at the very least, our entry-level ambition is to hold this government to the same standards that they held the last government to. And the amount of time that this government spent on the journalist fund, saying it's a perception of bias. It's a perception of bias. And the clip I tried to play, Luxon actually said it doesn't matter if there's no bias. It's the perception of bias. Whilst these guys are bringing in these sorts of laws, while these guys are bringing in, rebates for landlords, the people who own 7 rental properties, and the perception of this is, we don't want to go to the experts. We want us 3 to make the decision, and they wouldn't say this bit out loud, and so we can benefit our donors as best as possible, or so we can set up our board positions for once we leave Parliament. That's the perception. And if we listen to Christopher Luxon, if the perception's all that matters, then that's pretty terrifying.
Perception does matter because, so often actual corruption is very hard to trace and to find. And so that's why we have the perception of conflict of interest is enough to be a problem. And ministers are meant to step away when they have perceived conflicts of interest, and we're meant to set up systems that stop the perception of conflicts and the ability for abuse, not rely on discovering abuse and corruption when it actually happens, because it's very hard to detect.